All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all engaged in some lively discussions in your breakout rooms. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hear from each of our facilitators for each of the breakout rooms and kind of get a sense of what kind of discussions were talked about and what opportunities might have been identified. So I'm just going to go in order. So Andrea, if you would like to go first, just introduce what the breakout room was, maybe something that Nate talked about, and then some of the discussions that we had.
Okay, so we chatted about the opportunities for wood products and biomass, the bioeconomy at the higher scale. And so basically Nate walked us through kind of the economics behind the scenes of, as foresters, we're probably more familiar with what it takes to get it off the landscape, but really thinking about what are the economics that will drive putting value to that biomass and the bioeconomy that we would like to develop to utilize those materials coming off the forest as a result of thinning and such. And so Nate, feel free to correct me if I get anything mixed up a little bit on that. And so really the discussion, we had a lot of great questions. Unfortunately, we didn't get to one question, so maybe we'll be able to slip it in and have George ask his question. But some of the topics that people had questions about was, how would supply chain issue or supply, being able to track the supply from the stump to the plant is going to be very important to continue doing in the future. And how do you do that effectively, especially when you have it possibly coming from multiple sources of Forest Service land or private land. But it sounds like, though, the tools in order to track that chain of custody will become cheaper and more efficient to help decrease the price of doing that for landowners on that. Another question was around the trillion tree approach in terms of if we're trying to focus on doing more planting and getting more trees on the landscape, but then knowing climate change is occurring and how will that affect the stocking density, and obviously we want to have openings and everything. And so what that comes down to is knowing where we're doing the restocking, where restocking needs to occur, making sure it does happen, and where the regen is happening, making sure that remains on the landscape and doesn't die off to fulfill those needs of obviously getting more trees on the landscape. We had Mike had brought up an issue around investment of there was one specific plant that for a number of years had tried to get a plant up and running, but the investment, investors had to keep walking away. And so around that really comes down to as long as the focus for some of these plants is on the price of the biofuels and trying to compare it to gasoline, it's unfortunately not going to pencil out even with subsidies. And so until that, I think you said the word is decoupling, or until it's decoupled from, or in terms of either when the biofuel starts to reflect the renewable power and the incentives around renewable fuels, there will be that issue in trying to invest in those type of plants. But that being said, the aviation fuel sector is looking promising in terms around the biofuels. And the last part was looking at a lot of this discussion presentation was focused on east side forests where with regular fires and the fire regime and thinning and such. And so how would this work be applicable to the west side? And so for the west side, we'd be looking more at carbon sequestration and forest products. What's the value of keeping the trees on the landscape? And then once they do come off, recognizing the value of the carbon sequestered in the forest products and taking that into account. So so I think I capture everything pretty accurately. And then the last part actually was tortification as well, which was called they described it as super confusing space, which sounds like that could be a presentation all to itself as well. So was there anything else from the group that I didn't capture and such? Or
No, I think that was great, Andrea. And if we have a little bit of time after the other folks share, we can see if there's any residual questions. So with that, Dave, do you want to share some of the things you talked about in room 2, talking about perceptions?
Sure. Room 2 of the breakout session was focused on perceptions of wildfire, wildlife and climate for Northeastern Oregon. And the presenters were Joel Harder from the University of Colorado and Larry Hamilton from the University of New Hampshire. And their presentation was based on a long-term research effort called K4, which stands for Communities and Forests in Oregon. A few of the takeaways I got from our discussion this afternoon is that the long-term work by the K4 project allows us to understand the interconnectedness of communities and working lands, forests, and wildfire, especially for a Northeast Oregon context. Fire season temperatures for Northeast Oregon have been rising at about twice the rate of fire season temperatures globally, which I found to be a very interesting fact. They noted during the presentation that strong bipartisan support exists for active management to lessen wildfire risks and improve forest health. They shared some very interesting survey results concerning climate change. And they touched on the fact that climate change beliefs for Northeast Oregon residents seem to be tied closely to their political party affiliation, with the Democrats having a very different view of climate change when compared with folks who are associated with the Tea Party. For Northeast Oregon, human-caused climate change is supported by residents, or seems to be supported by residents at a lower level than for several other regions of the country, approximately 20% lower in terms of what the overall belief would be, especially in human-caused climate change. And then the last part of their presentation, which I found especially fascinating, involved wolves. So when Northeast Oregon residents were polled about elimination of wolves, it turned out that their political party affiliation also had a very strong influence on how they responded to those survey questions. So I see we still have Joel and Larry. Is there anything, I'm not sure about time, Jake, but they're here and they could share some more thoughts if we have a few minutes. It's up to you.
Yeah, we have plenty of time, Dave, but let's hear from our third breakout room, and then we'll kind of open it up for a more open discussion if there's any last minute thoughts.
Sounds great.
All right, so next I'd like to welcome our facilitator for our third room, which is Willie Crippen.
Okay, thanks, Jacob. We were talking in breakout room. We were talking about prescribed fire and smoke management, and Christina Clements from Oregon Department of Forestry Smoke Management Office gave us a presentation today. A lot of the discussion that she gave us was talking about smoke management planning, implementation of prescribed fires, reporting, and the procedures and processes to go through to attain those permissions and stay within the smoke management regulations. So we talked about that, what's required to be done for burning on getting burns done both on public and private lands. One of the things that came up this year is the smoke reporting system that we have been historically using, Fast Tracks, is offline now. And Christina can jump in, or we can go through that in questions and answers. But she doesn't really know, and we don't really know where that's going with the smoke reporting system. So there's kind of a new twist to this year. And advice was to plan early and get your smokes entered in the system early, and to get it off the books when you get it accomplished, so other folks can also get on with the burn. We talked about emissions calculations, and especially focused on pile burning emissions calculations, and using the burn calculators versus just visual calculations, and how that works, and how well the burn calculators work. And I think one of the big things that we talked about was the challenges of sharing the air sheds with agriculture, with non-industrial burning, and how the challenges that exist with trying to have everyone burn within the same air shed when some, especially agriculture, don't necessarily fall underneath the same rules. And I think that was pretty much most of the discussion. And Christina, if there's anything else that I missed there that you wanted to touch on before we go to a general question and answer session, jump right in there.
Yeah, you did a great job summarizing that. I can't think of anything to add. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Willie, and thank you, facilitators, for taking notes and providing your feedback from each of the breakout rooms. So we have some time here. I'd like to open it up if anybody has any specific questions, maybe residual questions from the breakout room that you didn't get to ask or answer. If any of the speakers have any other final thoughts that they would like to share, you can place questions in the chat. I see a question here from George. George, go ahead.
So I really appreciated the discussion about the challenges of trying to do restoration and using market and non-market values in order to justify payment of that. It seems like one of the biggest impediments to especially the lower value materials is the transportation costs. And I think it's also, when we look at the forest community and forest industry in particular, that of all the elements of the industry, that fossil fuel use in transportation is probably our biggest black eye. So I'm just wondering, are there any opportunities to go to a battery-based, electric-based economy that maybe brings these materials in, has a generation facility that provides the power? Any way to make those transportation costs less and make it more fossil fuel neutral?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think people are working really hard on that. I think depending on who you listen to, this is going to be not just battery based or electric powered fleets for long haul trucking, but it's going to be an issue with the labor force as well, in terms of robotics and AI based driverless systems, stuff like that. I think that's going to work itself out first in sectors where the products being transported have a higher value potentially. So it's one of the things that's difficult is those transportation distance, the transportation distance that you can go is related to the value of the product you're hauling, right? I can get something sent halfway around the world on FedEx, in a little box, and it doesn't seem to cost that much. But for products where the margin is very slim, that exactly what you're talking about, that transportation cost is very sensitive. So the financial viability of an enterprise is very sensitive to that. All of you know that from the forest industry. And so I think one of the things that happens is if you can increase the value of the 25 dry tons of material in the back of that chip van, it starts to change a little bit the distance that's viable. That's one aspect, but I do think the carbon footprint associated with fossil fuels for our supply chains is an issue. And so however we can increase the efficiency of that, I think probably fully electric log trucks and fully electric chip vans are going to happen first, in dense high value markets, not in the hinterlands like where I live in Montana and in really rural areas in Montana. But the point is, they're going to happen in the industry at some point, and then they're going to migrate into the forest industry. So it'll be exciting to see what happens. I have no expertise in that, so I was just pontificating. Thank you.
We had a question come through the chat here. What can mass timber and cross-laminated construction play in the sequestration of carbon? And I will open that up for anyone to answer, any of our breakout room speakers or facilitators.
I'll just mention really quick, just to get it going, but I would like to hear from others that the carbon benefit of a wood product is directly related to the longevity of that carbon. So the panels for mass timber and other things like that stay in buildings for very long periods of time, that's where we want to be storing carbon. So contrast that to carbon storage in very short-lived products like paper, and it's, I know it's a different raw material supply, but the idea is those products are great for long-term storage of carbon in harvested wood products. and the offsets associated with offsetting some other more carbon intensive material, potentially like steel and concrete.
Fitz, did you have a question?
Just a comment. Buildings comprise 40% of energy usage and therefore carbon footprint. And I would agree that mass timber, other wood products are most likely a less carbon intensive product. We know that, like on the College of Forestry's new building, there's 2,000 metric tons of sequestered carbon. The question we have is how much other carbon was created, and is it neutral? Is it, most likely it's better than concrete and steel completely, but what we need is really better life cycle analyses of these, because right now, when you look at some of the models that look at carbon and cycling, the life cycle analysis studies are inadequate. That is, we have short, medium, and long-term carbon storage building materials, but we haven't really factored in the length of time, particularly for these kinds of buildings. To give you an example, my in-laws' house is 300 years old. It seems like that these mass timber buildings could last that long as well. Anyway, life cycle analysis will be important in kind of looking at, how neutral or these buildings are and the amount of carbon that they can store.
Thank you, Fitz, for your input there. Got another question here in the chat. Pellet production in the Southeast United States is huge, but small here. What needs to change here? Nate, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just just a comment. I toured in Louisiana one of the Drax pellet facilities there, and the pellets that I think that can make it all the way around through the Panama Canal and to England typically come from mill residues, not from roundwood that's pelletized and goes over there. So that's one thing. The South has the advantage of that, as we just were talking about, that transportation distance, so you can get a different supply chain. And so a lot of thinking about what would the energy markets be like in places like Japan and South Korea, to go across the Pacific with those really large ships, that kind of Panamax style vessels, with really low per unit shipping costs and really low per unit supply chain costs. Maybe that would change the dynamic. I don't know. But what I'm reading into the question is that that Oregon is not a big supplier of exported. By export, I mean exported outside of Oregon wood pellets. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not actually sure either.
Another thing that the guy at Drax told me about those pellets is the pelletization process is actually a huge benefit in terms of densification for transportation efficiency. Once they get on the other side of the pond, they disaggregate them before they go into that facility. The other things may be different, but it's really a transportation efficiency proposition as much as anything else, which I thought was interesting. So the transportation cost is key, and that's why it's in these massive bulk ships.
All right. Well, are there any other questions? Any other thoughts from our other breakout room speakers, facilitators? Still have a few minutes left on our discussion here, so. Question here from George Icy, and I wasn't in room 3, but maybe I missed the discussion, but my impression is that there is more prescribed burning and thinning / debris pile burning than I've ever seen. Is this true? Willie or Christina, do you have any thoughts on that?
Let's see, I'm trying to read the question again. I wasn't. There's more prescribed burning and thinning debris pile burning. Well, actually, this year we had a lower amount of both pile burning, of pile burning because of the pandemic, because there was a request for voluntary people not to burn. And so the Forest Service, I believe the BLM, I know for sure the Forest Service decided that they would not burn this last fall because of that request. And even this year, they started to burn again, but a lot of folks kind of really held off on that. So in actuality, in the large scale, the federal folks are trying to increase pace and scale of burning because we're really, really behind on getting acres treated with prescribed fire. But because of the pandemic, it hasn't. We haven't really been able to get off the ground with more burning. So I don't know that to say that there's a lot more prescribed burning happening. I don't know that that's correct. There's a lot more movements to make that happen, but I don't know that we're there yet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Willie, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
No, I think she hit that pretty well, at least for this last year. You know, with health concerns and concerns for smoke, we were pretty well shut down. Got a little bit burning done in this area in the fall. Overall, though, the last 3 years, especially on private lands, we have been getting a lot more pile burning has been occurring, and we did get a pretty good window, you know, in the last 2 years to get some pretty good sized large scale burns on federal lands here in Northeast Oregon. We'll see what spring burning is going to bring this year. Right now, I don't think with the conditions as dry as they are, our windows spring burning's been it's going to be pretty short, I think.
Yeah, the Willow Whitman was still getting some work done around Phillips Lake, so that was good. Okay, are there any final thoughts, burning questions before we move to our closing remarks? Well, I want to thank all of the breakout room speakers, and I want to thank all of the facilitators for helping coordinate these breakout room session. So with that, a couple final housekeeping items as we start to wrap up here. CFE credits, the Day 2 code is 2021 OSAF opportunities. So please take note of that. It is in the chat as well. You'll need that in order to get CFE credits for Day 2. And then, like I mentioned earlier, please return those CFE forms to me by next Wednesday at the latest, and I'll get those submitted. Again, the virtual auction is going to be open until Sunday at 5. So please go check out those items and place your bids before they close. There's a couple great things on there. So, so with that, you know, this brings us to the end of our 2021 OSAF annual meeting. The decision to stick to the virtual format, it wasn't necessarily tough because we knew it was the right decision, but obviously it wasn't our first choice. The in-person annual meeting was something that I always looked forward to year after year, you know, a chance to network, chat with colleagues and catch up with old friends. I don't remember the last time Jeremy and I scouted a good silent auction, but I'm glad we could still have a virtual one. You know, from the tours to the business meeting, concurrent sessions, banquet dinner, being cornered by Trixie to buy raffle tickets, something that I really truly miss. But, you know, as foresters and natural resource professionals, we must take the best available science and make informed decisions and adapt where necessary. So I think some thank yous are really in order here. So first, I want to thank all of our great speakers over the last 2 days. We had some really excellent presentations that I hope showcased our kind of slice of heaven here in Northeastern Oregon. I hope you all have a better sense of forestry and natural resource management here, including some of the perspectives, the partnerships, the research, and the great discussions on opportunities that we had. I want to thank the Capital chapter for leading the virtual effort and to and demonstrating how to run a successful virtual annual meeting. We used their success as a guide as we were planning this meeting. I'm not sure if I could fill Julie Woodward's shoes as meeting chair. I want to thank our planning committee and those that have helped behind the scenes to make this meeting successful. Thank you all for your time and effort in planning this meeting. I know you probably never want to see an email, doodle poll, Zoom invitation from me ever again, but we really came together to and worked effectively to plan this meeting. I want to thank Andrea Watson and Melinda Olson from the Northwest office for putting the website together, registration, the virtual auction, sending emails to the Tri-State email, and Jeremy Sapp for getting emails to OSAF, and also Andrea's input to the agenda and edits to the program were crucial to getting it done on time. So thank you so much, Andrea. I want to thank Bonnie Day, a local graphic designer who really worked hard to make an awesome logo that you probably all saw for this year's meeting, as well as put together our program. So huge shout out to Bonnie for dealing with edits from Andrea and I and our last minute updates, but the program and the logo really turned out excellent. Of course, I got to thank our sponsors. So thank you so much for your generous support of this meeting. Sponsorship helped provide free registration for all students, helped with the cost of this meeting, and will help provide leadership and educational opportunities in the future and support the mission of OSAF and the society. Lastly, I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here for this annual meeting. I know you're all probably zoomed out. I know I am, but I appreciate you all being here. We had 120 folks register for this meeting, including a number of students, which I think is really great. It's been a difficult year for not only SAF, but other organizations and communities as well. But we'll get through these tough times, and your continued support of this organization is paramount to the success of our profession. I encourage you all to keep being involved, keep being leaders, and continue advocating for the stewardship we provide for our forests. Together we can accomplish great things. And I appreciate some of the comments from Dave Wells this morning at the business meeting. There is a lot of opportunity ahead. So it is Friday afternoon. I should probably start wrapping this up, but first I wanted to share something really quick with you all. I saved the date. So in October, the Blue Mountain chapter is going to be hosting a Northwest Active Management Tour. So please mark this date. More details will come, but if you're interested in seeing some management here in Northeastern Oregon, please consider joining us. And there's an email there if you would like more information. So next I want to turn it over to Jeremy Felty really quick to see if he has any final announcements. Jeremy?
Yeah, one more announcement of another event. I got verification around lunchtime today that the OSAF Foundation Golf Tournament will be taking place in person outdoors this year on August 5th at 8:30 a.m. here in Corvallis at the Trysting Tree Golf Course. You can expect that a message to the whole OSAF membership will go out soon, and it will cost $75. So if you're a golfer or you're not a golfer, we'd love to have you there from all chapters. It's a great time, and it's good to get a big group of people together to golf. And so if you're interested, just keep your eyes posted, or keep your eyes and ears open for a posting of the details. And that's all I probably have. Once again, thanks, Jake, and thank you to the Blue Mountain chapter. Outstanding job.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeremy. So with that, on behalf of the Blue Mountain chapter, thank you all so much for attending. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope to see you all very soon. So thank you.